it's Summer and Candace. We're with the Connected Life Book Club final podcast. This book has flown by.
Season 2.
The final episode of season 2 as we wrap up our talk on the gift of wonder. And this is where, as if we don't always go deep, this is where we get to tell you honestly, though, like what we thought of this book.
Yeah, it's more of an overview. Like we'll have specific questions that we answer, but it's less about going into each chapter or, this sounds weird. Even less about the book per se, but more about the book as a whole.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it's sort of, yeah.
Go with me on this one.
I'm with you on this one. Oh, so as we start off all of these, we've only ever done one before, but as I intend to start off all of these, Candace, what's in your cup?
I have a Klarbrunn grapefruit or pomelo or whatever they want to call it, sparkling water.
Sparkling water. So look at you being all responsible, hydrating your body appropriately. I have the pumpkin spice latte because it's back.
Nice.
And I love me the fall. But I got the short one because I learned that this was a thing you could do. You can get a small from Starbucks if you don't want to commit to all of the caffeine or calories. So I already had my coffee today, so I got a short pumpkin spice latte.
Just a itty bitty.
Isn't it so cute?
Little taste.
All right. So let's jump in because we have a special little treat that we're going to be bringing you a little bit later this podcast. So I want to get us there. So to start off with, in general, were there parts that you especially loved or parts that you especially didn't love about this book, Candace?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are definitely parts that I love that I think were fun to just open your mind to new possibilities and to give yourself permission to play and even lean into your own personality quirks. I mean, when she specifically talked about the different like play personalities and things like that, or the part when she talked about like arguing as a creative outlet.
I know you were so excited for that.
I love that because I mean, I can be somewhat confrontational from time to time, but it's never like mean. I don't argue with people because I'm mad at them. As a matter of fact, if I am mad, I will keep it to myself and just move on, like not talk to the person because that's like, if you can't say nothing at all, don't say it. But I really enjoy the banter and the creativity of coming up with, there's this game. Oh, I don't remember the game. I mean, I remember the game. I don't remember the title of the game, but it's basically you are given a person and a weapon and like a special power or something like that in cards. So you draw them out and then everybody in the circle has that and you have to quote unquote fight the person next to you by just describing why your mix of cards would win. And then everybody votes to see who won the argument, basically. You use all these different logic strategies and you just try to convince the people around you that, no, trust me, my giant kitten is way more powerful than his 100 crocodiles. Because have you ever seen a kitten play with yarn? Like, you just use these different things that don't actually make sense, but it's just fun to stretch your imagination.
Yeah, it's like a good little debate exercise.
Yes.
Get people on your side.
Yeah, some of the things that I didn't care for a ton, but maybe I could learn to. I know that you love this one, but the finger labyrinth, it didn't really do it for me. Okay. I just couldn't really I don't know, maybe it's just because I get too easily distracted anyways, that it was more of a distraction than like a thing going on in the back of my mind to help me concentrate. It just didn't work for me.
Okay.
I felt like, follow the line. And it just didn't work that well. There are some things that I didn't really get a chance to put into practice, partially because I'm like, I would never do that. But then there's another part of me that's like, well, we could try. It might be interesting, like the seed bombs. I didn't actually try that because it feels like I'm watching one of those Pinterest videos where they like, oh, grab your borax or whatever, make, and you're like, do I even, I gotta go to the store for that. Nah. But I would like to try that if I got a bunch of people together who are all on board and we made a thing of it. Then, okay, I'd like to try it. But as of now, it's like a good thought, but not something I put into practice.
Okay. So going through these chapters, there were some that I really liked the chapter, but I either didn't do or didn't love the practice of the chapter. So if I say like I didn't like this, that doesn't mean anything about the chapter that preceded it. Okay, so let's see. I marked some because I knew I was going to forget when it came down to it. I liked the 10 miracles before breakfast. That was for the open yourself up to awe and wonder. And that's just about like getting out in nature, walking around and observing, because so often we don't do that. It's just like going for a walk and being like, what gives me goosebumps? What am I noticing? Like, what small thing do I take for granted every day, which is really pretty amazing. I thought that was a cool one because that's something that I can do while I'm walking my dog, etc. And then the other thing I really dug like a shovel, is the finger labyrinth. So I did like that, but I will qualify it to say that I don't know if you've seen this necklace. I think I showed you.
You did.
I have a necklace that I bought after reading this book because I was like super into it. That is a super intricate labyrinth and it's tiny. And I bought this one because it has grooves to where like, I'm like, I could take off my earring and actually do this labyrinth. But this is where I feel what you're saying, because it's so small. It was actually really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
And it was super distracting and annoying to me last night. And I'm like, I'm just going to practice because it would just get caught on little grains of the wood, whatever. But I think the concept was really cool. For me, it didn't necessarily like ignite creativity, but it helped me focus in prayer because it was something for my eyes to do. Because when I close my eyes when I'm praying, I picture all of the things in my day. I picture things and it's not even a conscious thing. So that it just helped me focus. So I like that. But yeah, I liked the walking in circles thing. Just kind of picturing that like you're surrounded by Christ and protected and not alone. And so some of those like symbolism chapters were really good. The ones that required me to work and like really put time and energy in, those were some of the ones that I skipped, like the seed bombs, partly because of the arts and crafts side of it and it being a lot of work, but mostly because I have no idea where I would throw those things with anything that fit the rule that wasn't private property or wasn't like a restricted area. So I just thought it was really awesome how many different ideas the book gave.
Yeah.
And it's just a collection of ideas. If one works for you, great. If one doesn't, okay. If you need something new in a couple months because you're bored, there's more to choose from. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so too. So then as you were reading through, were there certain topics that just stuck out to you? Was there a chapter that kind of you just resonated with and it just stuck with you for a long time?
Yeah. So I think for me, a lot of this book was, again, like you said, giving permission. There was a lot where it's talking about observing your children playing or children playing, but I have kids, so that obviously brought to home. But just that permission to get creative. But there was 2 chapters, and I think it was just where I was and when I was reading them, about the resting in the moment and then the cultivating gratitude, because rest and gratitude are 2 themes that God keeps bringing me back to in this season. And so I had finally gotten around to carving a moment out for myself to sit and read. And I went to a coffee shop. Adrian watched the girls and I read. And those were the 2 chapters I read. They're back to back. And I was just laughing. And people in Starbucks thought I was crazy because I'm just sitting there like giggling over this book because I was just so excited that that's where I was going when that's just something God had shown me.
So have you found ways to put those topics into practice in your life? I mean, did the practices help, or is it just still one of those things that I'm thinking about and really hoping about?
Yes, to all of the things. But no, I mean, I think it did really help. This whole book has been helping me find ways to focus and rest and take that intentional time to be still, whether it's walking a finger labyrinth or thinking about that circle practice. And then the gratitude ends up always being a part of it, of just thanking God for the things in my life and not forgetting to thank God. I think it wasn't from the book, but I think Max Lucado had said, what if you only had today what you thanked God for yesterday? And so that quote with some of the stuff that she brought out about gratitude and stuff, it just was really something that's been stirring in my spirit. So it's definitely more than it was before, with room for it definitely to grow. I was really convicted by the staying close to the cracks chapter. I was really inspired by the visual of light, how a pure beam of light is actually made up of a variety of colors, and thinking of the diversity in our world as something that makes up the light of Christ. And so there was just a lot of images through this book that really spoke to me that I'm going to probably be mulling over for a long time. What about you?
Yeah, I think the things that really stuck out to me that I literally exclaimed while I was reading that, like, aha! Look at that! Look at that right there. I mean, I put like exclamation marks in the, the side, whatever, margins. And just the idea of how important play is. So at one point, it says, remember, we are earthlings, that chapter. She said that, schools in Oklahoma, Texas, and California are tripling recess time and are seeing positive results and seeing good things from kids that are just getting more creative time. And that like just stuck with me, because sometimes I don't give myself that permission to play, or I'll say, oh, I really want to go for a walk, but I have to do this or I have to do that. And those real world responsibilities weigh on me heavier than my responsibility to be creative and to allow myself some free time to just let my mind explore. It feels unproductive. And so then I feel kind of bad because of it, even though it's amazing and it, enhances our life and enhances so many different areas. Some of the other parts that were really poignant for me was, of course, when she was talking about, like you said, stay close to the cracks, that chapter, where it's just kind of reaching out and making yourself accessible to those who need help. That just stuck with me in a big way, because sometimes I feel like that is icing on the cake. Like I can live my life, I can go to work, I can keep my house in order, and that's good. That's it. Mission accomplished. But really reaching out to others and helping and shopping fair trade and doing things that benefit the world as a whole are also a part of those things that should be top of the list for us, contributing to the world in that way. To make sure, when she talked about immigration too, and like just praying for, and like, how much our heart bleeds for people that are in such a situation where they find themselves in refugee camps or find themselves, crossing over the border because it's their only hope. Like just to be intentional about praying for that and not just seeing it in the news and like, well, yep, I don't live in Texas, so it doesn't really affect me, because it does. And as humanity works together, it affects all of us. And so those big picture things, actually making those a priority and not just, I have extra time, so I'm going to pray about this. I have, extra money, so I'm going to get the fair trade kind instead of the super cheap kind. But actually making that a priority, I think stuck with me in a really big way.
Yeah, I think that chapter really kind of reminded me of just how much I wasn't doing that well lately. And that is a good impact to have, I think, that healthy conviction. But yeah, and I agree with you. I loved the examples that she gave about play and how what sparks creativity in someone isn't going to be the same in someone else, and play looks so different. So there's so many things that we could do that would be considered play, like arguing, that we wouldn't have considered before. And I really just loved how that was tied back to the personality of God. It was like, this isn't just frivolous. Like, this is getting in touch with the divine, because God is creative and God is imaginative and God plays and God is joy and God is love, and all of these things that we embrace more as kids, that we grow out of,
right? And
just, that permission to come back to it. I think that's what it keeps coming back to for me, is it's just this book I felt like gave me permission for a lot of things I didn't think of.
So what are the areas where we need to work more, or that, we need to kind of grow ourselves?
You first.
Okay. So I think for me, how do I put this without being, I hope that you don't get the wrong picture of me, but I think that I can sometimes be a little judgmental. And so trying not to scoff at what other people find to be creative and life-giving. And not that I like scoff, like I'm like, look at that nerd, but it's just like, I don't know. I sometimes find certain creative things like, I mean, I guess, but it's just not my cup of tea. And I think to be more open to that and to give people the freedom to also follow the creative paths, that they enjoy, and not have it like, seriously, that's the thing. All right. That's the thing that, sparks your creativity. Cool. Good for you. But not take it personally for whatever reason. I don't know why that's something that kind of lingers in the back of my head. And so, yeah, like even I read a children's book the other day, and that was one of those things where I'm like, all right, I get it. The 1, 2, 3 hop on pop or whatever. Like those are silly and creative and goofy and whatever. But I read a children's book when we were babysitting to a friend's kids as they're going to bed. And I got kind of choked up in the middle of it. And it was just like, what a cool, imaginative way to share God's love. Because the book was, I think it was a Max Lucado book, but it was very specifically about, the plans that God has for you. And it was told through the story of an acorn becoming a big tree. And, it's cheesy and, made for little kids, of course. So it's super simplistic, but it was so cute. And it was just a really clear way of showing that God loves us and has created us for a specific purpose, and our purpose is not the same as somebody else's. And so that kind of choked me up, and I didn't really give that the time of day when I was first reading about it. And so I think to be more open to those things that I initially kind of gloss over, I think would be an area that I need more work.
Yeah. I think for me, the area that I'm realizing I shy away from is anything that brings me out of my comfort zone. And that's why the practices that resonated the most with me were the ones that I didn't have to do anything to accomplish, really. Like while I'm sitting there, I can be picturing circles. While I'm sitting there, I can be doing a finger labyrinth or thinking of things that I'm grateful for. But the things that forced me to go out into the community or to engage with, anyone, were the ones that I either didn't do or was just like, I guess, and just dragged my feet on, which I would consider myself a pretty extroverted person. But I don't know. I just lately in my old age, I'm becoming more and more of like that introverted homebody person. I don't make me go places. Don't make me see people. But that's probably why that chapter on staying close to the cracks and being involved in serving the needy in our communities, et cetera, that's something I was so convicted by, because in this recent season of my life, that hasn't been a big part, because that requires me going outside of my comfort zone. And I never regret when I do, but I just don't. And so that's probably just something in general I need to do, especially if I want to model any of these principles for my kids, because that requires me being public and going outside my comfort zone and encouraging them to do the same, because it's a good thing. I believe that. I just don't always do that. So do what I say, not what I do.
Well, I think that it's been really fun to dive into these questions and for, even to be able to share how it's affected our lives. But we asked you for questions that we could pass along to Christine, and we were able to find a time when we can talk to Christine. So I was just really looking forward to asking her those questions. Yeah. So we're going to give her a call.
All right. Hold on one second.
Welcome. We just gave Christine a call. So Christine, as we start our podcast here with you, as we dive in, we always like to start our podcast off with a question. It's a little silly. It's, what's in your cup? So do you currently have a cup, and what beverage is in it?
Well, actually, I just finished a big cup of coffee, but I don't have one in front of me right at the moment.
Oh, you poor
that
thing.
Counts. Big cup of coffee. That's my jam. So that totally works.
Well, and I usually do. One of the things my husband says is that part of what he loves, having married into the Commonwealth, I come from Australia, is that cups of tea and coffee appear on a regular basis. And he said that didn't happen before. So he loves it.
Well, that is awesome, Christine. And we've so enjoyed reading your book. Can I just say that? I especially have really had so much fun. I've been so blessed. And so we have compiled some questions for you. Candace and I have, but then we've also reached out to some of the people joining us in this book club who have some questions and comments. And so the first thing, though, that I am just dying to know, this book is really inspiring. It's really energizing, but I can't believe that this was always something that you just inherently knew. Like, what was your journey getting to this point? Have you always been super creative? What did that look like for you?
No, I have not been super creative. In fact, if you'd asked me 20 years ago if I was a creative person, I would have said no way. I think like so many of us, I really didn't recognize my creativity until, God started to take me on a spiritual journey, kind of reaching outside, the normal box of what we think of as spiritual practices and prayer and things like that. And it actually began with a friend in New Zealand by the name of Mark Pearson, who's actually coming to visit later this week. And he was one of the very first people that I think introduced Protestants to Stations of the Cross. And I think I talk about him, I do, in The Gift of Wonder. And he kind of started to open my mind to all kinds of creative possibilities in terms of prayer and worship. And it was kind of like my brain started to zoom from there. I started to write prayers. I started to doodle. And I call it doodling because I am certainly not an artist. And if I call it doodling, then it doesn't matter if it looks messy. It doesn't matter if it's, not creative in any form. Accepted form. And I just, it's like the creativity took off from there. And it's just been a wonderful journey. And I've had lots of companions that have helped me. I have a friend in British Columbia who is an expressive arts therapist, Kim Bulk. And again, I talk about her several times in The Gift of Wonder. And she has just helped spur my creativity in beautiful ways. And then Lily Lewin down in Nashville. And so I would say it's been a combination of people that have given me permission to think outside the box and to become creative, and then allowing God to guide me on a journey. It's just been wonderful. And I think it's kind of like creativity begets creativity. So you just keep going, and you start to realize, wow, all of us have creativity that often isn't allowed to be expressed. And it's just been wonderful to go on that journey.
Christine, I feel like your book for me has given me some of that same permission. Like, I feel like there's just been outlets that have opened up to me that I never connected to God before. And so I appreciate that so much. And what I want to know from you, is it always been easy? Like, once you kind of tapped into that creativity, has it just been a floodgate ever since? Or has that still been something you've had to come back to and revisit and reignite along the way?
I have to revisit and reignite it along the way. In fact, I've recently had to do that for myself. I'd gone through a period of several months where I felt, wow, I just haven't had any creativity. What's wrong with me? Has it dried up? And then I realized that the problem was I was getting too busy. I wasn't allowing myself to take time for creativity. And I wasn't allowing really God to lead me into the possibility of something a little bit different either. I think that's been part of the key. I'm the kind of person that and you can probably tell this from the book, from the ideas that I give and the fact that I've tried so many different things at different times. I'm not the kind of person who can delve into one thing and stick with it forever.
Me neither.
And some people are, which is great. I think that we all need to find our creative outlets. And some of us need permission to keep experimenting. Others just need permission to find what it is that God wants them to do and stick with it, I think. So part of the purpose of the Gift of Wonder has been to provide a lot of different creative possibilities for people that say, oh, yeah, I could try that, or, oh, no, that's not for me. So it's been a fun journey, and hopefully others, and I'm delighted to hear that it's been something that's provided you with that permission as well, because that's really been the purpose of the Gift of Wonder.
I think that's huge. And I think especially the busyness of it all, about how busyness can kind of take over our lives and crush that creative side to a certain extent. Because one of my questions is, where do you get the time? I mean, when it comes to all of these different things, I'm like, if I put everything into practice, I don't even think I could show up for work. I mean, we got a full day ahead of us.
Well, it's true. And there's no way that one person or even, a group of people really could put into practice everything that I talk about in the Gift of Wonder. As I said, I think what it is it's kind of gives a lot of possibilities for people to say, oh, this is the one that I think I'll give a go at. And it doesn't take that long. I would usually just spend 10, 15 minutes in the morning. Once upon a time I was introduced to as the traditional quiet time, but it's no longer traditional for me. Sometimes it's not even that long, and I'll pull out what I'm starting to call my doodling journal, and I'll pull out some colored, usually gel pens, because they're the least messy of things. And I'll just, write a question, or I'll draw a little sketch, and I'll just doodle, and I'll just have some fun. So it doesn't take very long at all. Or else I'll pull out one of my finger labyrinths, and I'll just walk it. That takes about 5 minutes, probably, and just focusing in on the presence of God. Now, other things take longer, but I don't do them all the time. Like I talk about one of the things that I love doing, which is making contemplative gardens, little contemplative gardens. And that, that takes a lot of thought, and it takes a lot of time putting it together. But, I probably make 3 of those a year at the most. That's kind of, and that's something that I particularly like because I'm a mad keen gardener. So there can be a combination of these things that we can do on a regular basis that only take a few minutes, and then possibilities that we do occasionally. I think that's a good combination.
I think that's really nice, because as much as you're giving people permission to be creative, you're also saying, it doesn't have to be outside of the box for everything you do. Like our friend Carla, she wrote on Facebook, she said, does Christine do anything normal? Which I think is coming from a really honest place. She's saying, to see this explosion of creativity is making me feel a little inadequate, to be honest. And she goes, I'd really just like to know what makes up Christine's boring side. Like, what are her normal, quote unquote, normal traditional things that she still stands by?
I read the Bible. In fact, I don't necessarily do it every morning, but virtually every morning. I will usually read. My husband and I usually use the common lectionary reading. So an Old Testament reading, a psalm, and a gospel reading. That's usually what I do. If I've got the time. Often I've only got time for one of those, and so I'll do that. But I like to be grounded in the Scripture. I'll often just sit and pray for friends too. So those are probably the so-called normal things that I do. And they're very, very important for me. I don't want to suggest to people that they give up reading the Scriptures or praying for people, and of course some of the tools that I give are ways that, can kind of help people focus with a different way of doing things on praying for people. One of my friends confessed to me that she always had trouble praying for people. And then, I recommended to her the book, Praying with Color. And she said it was like suddenly she could pray for people, because it was a tool that helped her focus. And so sometimes, some of the things that I suggest are actually the tools that help us focus so that we can do the traditional things, like reading the scripture or praying for people or praying for situations.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's helpful to remember that what you're offering is this concentrated picture of ideas that people could do. And it's not necessarily that Christine 24 hours a day is painting rocks and making seed bombs. But so I do have to ask, though, when I first started reading this book, and I think I'm a pretty open-minded, free-spirited person, it was so different for me. Like, I was shocked on how different it felt for me from what I'm used to. And so have you gotten pushback? Have there been people that are like, this is just too weird, this is too much, this is too new age? Have you gotten pushback on this way of worshiping, and what are some of that feedback that you've gotten?
I have. In fact, I think there's a review on Amazon that basically says that it's a bit weird.
She's
weird. But I think that, of course, the people that make it all the way through the book are ones that are looking for something a little weird, a little out of the box. I think that's part of it, and often people that have had creative urges and have never felt that they've really been allowed to express those. And I think there are so many. I mean, there are many churches that don't allow people to be creative or imaginative. So there are a lot of people that feel as though those kinds of urges have been damped down. There are a lot of people that feel that, feel guilty if they want to express these things. But then on the other hand, there's a growing wave of people who are expressing themselves more creatively and trying to bring that into their churches. Some of them successfully, some of them less successfully. and I think part of it is because we've bought into this very traditional way of doing things, which is very much in our heads. It's just not kind of, in many churches, it's not acceptable to give expression apart from very confined way of doing things. And so breaking outside of that box is very, very difficult, I think, for all of us. I mean, the initial part of the journey for me probably took about 5 years, I would say. Kind of getting introduced to some contemplative practices and thinking, wow, this is a bit weird, or wow, this is not something that I could ever come at, And then I now look back at some of those things that 20 years ago I would have thought, oh, this is really weird. And I think, oh, yes, and now I'm doing it. So, it's a journey. And I think just accepting that fact and thinking, is there one step that God might be asking us to take, or asking me to take at this point in time, and I think is a good place to start, and seeing what that is. And it's a different starting place, I think, for all of it. And again, I think that's part of the reason that, I know there's a lot in this book, and I think part of the reason I wanted to address so many of these places is because I do want to give the possibility of starting places for people who have different interests or who might see something as weird that somebody else thinks is wonderful. That's part of it. And just to have an open mind to what God's Spirit might be saying to us.
So have you heard from people who have come through this journey, come out the other side, and have found real breakthrough? What are some of those people saying?
Well, I've had a number of people that have told me, like you, that it's been like a breakthrough book for them. And people that have taken it on retreat with them. One woman told me that she thinks that the only way to read my book is barefooted on the grass, kind of enjoying the sunshine type of thing. I've known others that have really found it a wonderful way to explore their creativity, that have gone through this journey and said, hey, this is what it is for me. In fact, it's been fascinating to me to watch some of the things that people have done and thinking, oh, she's gone further in that direction than I would ever have thought of doing. In terms of one woman that facilitated a retreat that she used the gift of wonder for, in which she had people actually not just making labyrinths, but making like Celtic style crosses out of Play-Doh, and then getting people to create these as a tool that they could use. I had somebody else that actually created a dice game, where she had people put different words on different sides of the dice, and then you had two dice, and you rolled the dice. These were like 6 inches square. You rolled them, and you came up with 2 words, and then you had to write a reflection on those 2 words. And she just told me about how much fun it had been to do this. I've had other people that have started doing collage as a result of reading through this, and I've looked at some of the other resources that I referred them to. And people that have started, or felt that it's given them permission to spend more time in nature and to connect to the God who is present in everything, and to really explore that presence. So I've had people that have, really connected to it in a broad variety of ways.
We've heard from so many listeners who can, I would say, parrot much of what you just said. Like, it's been their experience too. One I want to share with you, her name is Jen. And she said, I've always been a very serious type person. I rarely took the time to look for God's glory in the world. I felt I had to do everything perfectly. But this book, it's helped me to start connecting with the child I never knew was inside me, to realize that I am loved by God, regardless if what I do is perfect or not. I've started looking for things in nature and enjoying the process of refinding my inner child. And my attitude is so much more positive. My husband has commented on how much more I am going down the road untaken, so to speak. She goes, I feel like the childhood I never had, I'm finally having. I love living in wonder and awe. And I just really wanted to share that with you as someone who's been impacted by your book.
That is absolutely beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. And, reconnecting to our inner child. What could be more beautiful than that? And to recognize that this is meant to be part of our spiritual journey. What a delight. Thank you for sharing that. That really blessed me to hear that.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much for writing this book.
All right, so I really have to know, Christine, as I was reading, especially about the seed bombs, have you ever gotten in trouble for throwing seed bombs?
No. I've known people that have, but I've tried to when we've done this, and I've done it with church in Denver. I did it with another one in BC, and with a few different ones. We try to say to people, now remember, don't throw them on private property unless you've got permission. There are certain guidelines. And, of course, people don't listen to the guidelines necessarily. But, obviously this is not an original idea with me. And I've known people that have thrown seed bombs into toxic waste sites that have gotten into trouble, usually because they've done it en masse. Not just kind of surreptitiously one person throwing a seed bomb into a place, but because a whole group of people have gone, as a protest. Really, and throwing them in. And hope, and some, wildflowers have come up as a result of that. But yeah, usually what, one person does is not going to raise anybody's ire unless they're blatantly doing it in a place that they shouldn't be doing it, I think.
Right. That makes sense. Well, it's good to hear that you never got arrested for that. So in chapter 4, you talk about the different play personalities, which I thought was really cool. I get very interested in different personality types and just the ways that we can kind of learn a little bit more about ourselves by reading through some definitions. So, of course, there's, just as a reminder for people listening, the Joker, the explorer, the competitor, the director, the collector, the artist, the storyteller, and the kinesthetic.
Kinesthetic, yeah.
Kinesthetic, there you go. So which play personality do you most relate to?
I'm the director. I mean, very much in that and this is part of what probably you're seeing in this book, is that I love to organize things. I love to organize parties. I love to organize events. Most of my friends think I'm absolutely crazy because of that. And, I think part of what comes through the book, of course, is that I love to help others. In a way, I love to organize things that provide avenues for people to express themselves as well. So I would say that is my major play personality, because that's fun for me, But I'm also I'm an explorer. I've spent most of my life exploring, and I'm a collector. As you can tell, I collect shells, I collect rocks, I collect plants. I'm embarrassed to tell you how many indoor plants I have, and I'm looking outside and thinking, and how many of these need to be brought in for the winter?
Goodness.
Where are they going to be put, kind of thing. So they're the main ones that I would say I identify with.
So, Christine, I love how many ideas you did give us and how many things that you laid out for us. Now, here's my question for you. If you had to pick one, which I know would be hard because you're not someone who sticks with one thing very long, as you explained, which I understand. But what is your favorite of all of the exercises and suggestions you gave? Which one has connected you to God most effectively, most often?
I would think the Lectio Terra, getting out into nature. And really, and partly because I'm a person who not just loves gardening but loves nature. The idea that nature is not just something to kind of admire, but that there is a way to connect to the sense of the presence of God within nature would probably be the one that is most, definitely most. It's something I do all the time, and this has kind of opened up, as I started to explore this, it opened up a whole new dimension of my experience of nature. And I think that, I talk about, and not just that, but in a way what I'd move into that, my husband and I doing awe and wonder walks. Calling our walks awe and wonder walks. And it's like it's the same, in a way, same kind of thing. As we walk, we'll often point out to each other the things that give us a sense of awe. And I've noticed for both of us, it's extended beyond our walks. We sit out on our front porch every evening on these lovely summer evenings and comment on the flowers in the garden that give us a sense of awe and things like that. And it's kind of that same kind of a process of looking at them and recognizing the presence of God within these things and reflecting on that and what of God it reveals to us. And so, I would say that every time I walk around my garden, to a certain extent, I'm kind of going through a certain sense of that reflecting on the presence of God in a flower, in a piece of fruit, in all the different dimensions of what we see of creation. So, I do that one on a regular basis.
So I think one thing that has almost surprised me by some of these things is I didn't always connect these fun, creative things with true healing. Like, I understand how, okay, doodling about how God's helped me in my day can make me be aware of how God's helping me in my day. But there have been so many positive things that have come out of these exercises for so many people. And I really want to tell you, kind of want to leave you with this story about Terry. Now, Terry came to a concert we did recently. She shared some of her story with me, but she is part of our book club. And she wasn't planning on following along with this book because she's just in a season of life right now, which is really hard. Her brother had gotten diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in January. He passed away in June, and we started this book on July 1st. And so she wasn't planning on attending. She ended up winning a free book through the book club. So she joined us. But she has remarked on multiple occasions how your work has really helped her through her time of grieving, helping her stay connected to God when she's hurting. And she wanted us to share this with you. She says, this book has opened my eyes to many things. Reading this book through a season of grief has helped me slow down, enjoy nature, which I've never really been an outside person before this, doodle more, and quiet my heart for God. Many blessings to Christine that God put this book on her heart and has inspired her to share it with so many. And so I just want to let you know that your book is impacting lives, and just a small sampling from our own book club members. But thank you for all that you're doing.
No, you're welcome. That's beautiful too, and it's true. We don't think of these kinds of practices as bringing healing, but I think that's what kind of moves us continuing into the direction, is because we start to find a little bit of healing, and then we keep moving and more healing, and it's wonderful.
That is so cool. Well, thank you so much for everything, Christine. I have one more question for you. One thing that was unsettling to my spirit, it was something that you talked about a number of times throughout the book, and I'm really, really glad you touched on them, are things like immigration, things like, the African children who are slaves for chocolate. I mean, that just blows my mind. And I'm curious, what has inspired you to be such a champion for those topics?
The thing that radicalized me was working in the refugee camps on the Thai-Cambodian border in the mid-1980s. Being exposed for the first time to poverty, to, refugees, to literally kids dying in my arms at times, and that affected me in a way that has stayed with me for the rest of my life. And it's radicalized me in other ways too. It's made me much more aware of the horror of refugee camps, the pain of kids in slavery, and still so many, that are in enslaved conditions. And the ways that I think that our lifestyles contribute to it as well. So that was the radicalizing moment. And of course, kind of continuing, what I find is I can easily kind of pretend these things still aren't happening, but I need to keep myself exposed to these kind of issues so that they really do continue to impact me. And they keep me radical in a way. In fact, in some ways, I think I've become more radical. Maybe as I've continued to move on this journey, it's made me, it's not just liberated me in terms of my creativity, but it's liberated me in terms of my desire to engage in the world and the tremendous pain and the suffering that there is in our world.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that the more people's eyes are open to these things that our lifestyle contributes to, the more we really understand the importance of things that honestly are kind of trendy right now, but they're really, really important in things like fair trade and helping those that need it the most right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, and, these things, even if they become trendy, aren't trendy for very long, and then they kind of get forgotten. But, we need to make them trendy all the time, I think. And some of these kinds of things that I talk about, I think, are a way to do that.
Yeah, that's been really helpful. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us. It's been really nice to connect with you.
You too. It's lovely to chat to you too.
Okay, so we had a chance to chat with Christine. She's awesome. I'm so glad that we did that. But I need to know, Candace, now that she's no longer on the call with us, you can be honest. Final thoughts. Did you actually like this book?
That's a solid question, I think. Okay, here are my thoughts. And again, I'm trying really hard to make myself sound like not a bad person.
Ooh, I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Oh, jeepers. Okay, so I did, yes. Overall, I really liked the book. I liked the concept. I like the idea of finding excitement and joy and wonder through God's eyes. You know, that, I mean, is something that I've always loved kind of in the back of my head. Like, I grew up in youth ministry, and not just like I went to youth ministry when I was an appropriately youth ministry aged child, but my mom was a youth minister person, not an actual youth minister. She worked in youth ministry for my entire life up until I graduated. I mean, forever. And so we were living and breathing goofy youth ministry games and different ways to like get kids interested and involved with the gospel and with ministry. And so I've just always felt like there's a bigger place for that in our adult world, in our adult ministries, that we just haven't been taking advantage of, because people like fun things. I'm pretty passionate about games.
That's true.
I really like playing games. And I think that it brings people together. It creates a closer bond. I think that it helps us just laugh. And that is part of God's plan for our life as well. And so yes, I really like the book. If I was reading the book on my own, I probably wouldn't have finished it.
Oh, okay.
Like, I almost 100% wouldn't have finished it. And it's not because it was bad, but because it was kind of an overload for me. Like, towards the middle, I kind of just got washed out with the creative. Like, what does creative even mean anymore? You know, like, you say the word toast 17 times. What does toast even mean anymore? You know, it just kind of had that feeling to me where it was an overload, where I just it wasn't as interesting. It didn't quite hold me captive all the way to the end, which is a bummer, because like the last few chapters were my favorite. You know, so if it wasn't for the book club and I didn't actually get to those chapters, I probably would have been left with kind of a meh taste in my mouth. But after completing it and, you know, having her vision on, you know, the world as a whole and wrapping all these things together and even bringing other people's faith together so that we can just be more creative and draw closer to God through that, I probably would have missed out on that. And, you know, that's kind of a bummer, but I'm glad that I didn't. So overall, yes, I liked it. Side note, I only finished it because we're in the book club.
Okay, that's fair. I can roll with that.
Yes. What do you think? Did you actually like it?
I actually loved it.
She actually loved it, everybody.
I really enjoyed this book. I enjoyed it more than our first book. And which in some ways is surprising, because I'm really passionate about storytelling and stories. And I feel like the first book was a collection of stories, but I'm also a bit nerdy. And so I loved that this book was set up kind of like a reference book.
Yeah.
It just kind of brought me back to my college days. And it was just really exciting to me to be able to study some of these things that actually made me think. Like, these are in many ways new ideas for me and ideas I needed to hear. Like, I just, in this season of my life, I needed this. I will say that I know that for some people it was hard to get through. And I get that. I do get that, because this was a bit of an overload. So I really enjoyed the fact that Christine acknowledged that, and that that's not the purpose of this book, is not to be just an easily consumed feel-good book. This is supposed to be a concentrated, condensed collection of ideas.
Right.
And so that's kind of the way I handled this. This is a book I will not be just turning around and regifting or donating because now I've read it, I'm never going to read it again. This is a book I could see myself going back to be re-inspired and to just reread certain chapters, because there's way too much to even absorb. Like,
Yeah.
I just didn't even get all of the things that she was saying because there was so much of it.
Right. Well, and I appreciate how she, referenced that of like, for her, it's been a years-long journey. And there have been the ups and downs and times when it's, she's really on fire and times when it's like, what am I even
months
doing?
where she's like, I've not done a single creative thing in months.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm so glad that we got to talk to her because
for sure.
it opened up that conversation just a little bit more of like, it's okay, take it at your own time, come back to it. Maybe there's something that'll strike you a little bit later. And, that was really cool.
And I think that what you said, makes sense, that if it wasn't for the book club, you wouldn't have finished. I think that in that way, the book club is just awesome. For this book, I do wish that we had been able to take it at a slower pace.
Sure.
For this book, I think for a lot of reasons, a book club setting like this on a 6-week schedule, which I'm all for many reasons, though, this book, I would have wanted to spend like a week on each chapter, and just
which is
really pick
kind
it
of how
apart.
she set it up, really.
Yeah.
So, I understand that for sure. And now that you've read through it, you could even do your own group with some people and say, hey, let's, I appreciated this. I want to make it more part of my life. I want to even take little rabbit trails and go off on my own creative things that have spurred off of some of these ideas. And you can make that a reality in your friend group or church group or whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely less of a beach read and more of a textbook style.
Yes.
Like each chapter is its own thing. So, but I personally, I loved it and inspired me. I'm going to keep it. I'm going to read it again. I'm going to reference it. And it's been a huge blessing in my life. So I hope it's been a blessing in your life, and we'd love to know what you think. As we wrap up this book, as we gear up for the next one, we want to make sure that you're along for the ride and that you're engaged and you're enjoying yourself. So jump on, let us know what your overarching thoughts were, and stick with us because we'll be bringing you book 3 before too long.
And hey, just a side note, if you are excited about the book club, you're grateful to be a part of it, you want other friends to be a part of it as well, please encourage them to sign up at the connectedlifebookclub.com instead of just randomly adding them to the Facebook group, because we want them to have all the information. We want them to have access to all the resources as well. So as you are thinking, hey, I want my friends to be a part of this with me, just send them the link, connectedlifebookclub.com, because we want them to be as invested as you are as well. And so just adding them to a Facebook group isn't exactly the way we want to go about doing it.
So if you are on our Facebook group, though, please know conversations don't stop when the book does. Everything keeps going. In fact, there are people who are still not even halfway done, and rock on. Take it at your pace and stay up to date with all of the information, all of the updates, all the things coming. connectedlifebookclub.com.